What kinds of sin do we all commit that are unintentional? Why is the sacrifice for a priest and the whole congregation's sins greater than a community leader and an individual common person's sins? Why are these last two offerings mandatory and not voluntary like the first three? Let's begin with the forgiveness of unintentional sin in Leviticus 4. What if a priest sins unintentionally by doing what's forbidden? The Lord said to Moses, "Say to the Israelites, when anyone sins unintentionally and does what's forbidden in any of the Lord's commands, if the anointed priest sins, bringing guilt on the people, he must bring to the Lord a young bull, without defect, as a sin offering for the sin he's committed. He's to present the bull at the entrance of the tent of meeting, before the Lord. He's to lay his hand on it and slaughter it there before the Lord." Where was the priest to sprinkle the bull's blood and pour what was left? Then the anointed priest shall take some of the bull's blood and bring it to the tabernacle of meeting. The priest shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle some of the blood 7 times before the Lord, in front of the veil of the sanctuary. And the priest shall put some of the blood on the horns of the altar of sweet incense before the Lord, which is in the tabernacle of meeting. And he shall pour the remaining blood of the bull at the base of the altar of the burnt offering, which is at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. What was the priest to do with the fat of the bull? What are some examples where a priest could sin? Then the priest must remove all the fat of the bull to be offered as a sin offering. This includes all the fat around the internal organs, the 2 kidneys and the fat around them near the loins, and the long lobe of the liver. He must remove these along with the kidneys, just as he does with cattle offered as a peace offering, and burn them on the altar of burnt offerings. But he must take whatever's left of the bull, its hide, meat, heads, legs, internal organs, and dung, and carry it away to a place outside the camp that's ceremonially clean, the place where the ashes are dumped. There on the ash heap, he'll burn it on a wood fire. What if the whole congregation sins unintentionally by doing what's forbidden? If the whole congregation of Israel sins, and the thing is hidden from the eyes of the assembly, and they've done any of the things which Yahweh has commanded not to be done, and are guilty, when the sin in which they've sinned is known, then the assembly shall offer a young bull for a sin offering, and bring it before the tent of meeting. The elders of the congregation shall lay their hands on the head of the bull before Yahweh, and the bull shall be killed before Yahweh. The anointed priest shall bring some of the blood of the bull to the tent of meeting. Where was the priest to sprinkle the bull's blood and pour what was left? The priest will dip his finger into the blood and sprinkle it 7 times before the Lord toward the inner curtain. Then he'll put some of the blood on the horns of the altar that's before the Lord in the meeting tent. He'll pour all the rest of the blood out at the base of the altar of entirely burnt offerings that's at the meeting tent's entrance. What was the priest to do with the fat of the bull? What are some examples where a whole nation could sin? After this, the priest will remove the fat from the bull and send it up in smoke on the altar. Finally, he'll burn its remains outside the camp, just as he did with the other bull. By this sacrifice, the sin of the whole nation will be forgiven. What if a community leader sins unintentionally by doing what's forbidden? When a leader sins, doing unintentionally any one of the things that by the commandments of the Lord his God ought not to be done, and realizes his guilt, or the sin which he has committed is made known to him, he shall bring as his offering a goat, a male without blemish, and shall lay his hand on the head of the goat, and kill it in the place where they kill the burnt offering before the Lord. It's a sin offering. What was the priest to do with the blood and fat of the goat? What are some examples where a leader could sin? Then the priest must take some of the blood from the sin offering with his finger and apply it to the horns of the altar of burnt offering. The rest of the blood he must pour out at the base of the altar of burnt offering. He must burn all its fat on the altar, like the fat of the fellowship sacrifice. In this way the priest will make atonement on his behalf for that person's sin, and he'll be forgiven. What if a commoner sins unintentionally by doing what's forbidden? If any of the common people of the land inadvertently sins by disobeying one of the Lord's commands that should not be violated, he'll be guilty. When the sin that he committed is disclosed to him, he's to bring his offering for the sin that he had committed, a female goat without defect. He's to lay his hand on the head of the sin offering and slaughter it at the place for burnt offering. What was the priest to do with the blood and fat of the goat? What are some examples where one of the common people could sin? And the priest shall take of the blood thereof with his finger, and put it upon the horns of the altar of burnt offering, and shall pour out all the blood thereof at the bottom of the altar. And he shall take away all the fat thereof, as the fat is taken away from off the sacrifice of peace offerings. And the priest shall burn it upon the altar for a sweet savour unto the Lord. And the priest shall make an atonement for him, and it shall be forgiven him. What alternate animal could be sacrificed instead of a goat? But if he brings a lamb as his offering for a sin offering, he shall bring it a female without blemish, and he shall lay his hand on the head of the sin offering, and slaughter it for a sin offering in the place where they lay the burnt offering. What was the priest to do with the blood and fat of the lamb? What are some examples where common people could sin? And the priest is to take some of the blood of the sin offering with his finger and put it on the horns of the altar of burnt offering. And all the rest of the blood he shall pour out at the base of the altar. Then he shall remove all its fat, just as the fat of the lamb is removed from the sacrifice of the peace offerings. And the priest shall offer it up in smoke on the altar, on the offerings by fire to the Lord. So the priest shall make atonement for him regarding his sin which he's committed, and he'll be forgiven. Should we make sin offerings? Or do we have a better sacrifice? Therefore there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus, because through Jesus Christ, the law of the Spirit who gives life, has set you free from the law of sin and death. For what the law was powerless to do, because it was weakened by the flesh, God did by sending his own Son, in the likeness of sinful flesh, to be a sin offering. And so he condemned sin in the flesh, in order that the righteous requirement of the law might be fully met in us, who do not live according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. What kinds of sin do we all commit that are unintentional? Why is the sacrifice for a priest's sins, or the whole congregation's sins, greater than a community leader or an individual common person? Why are these last two offerings mandatory and not voluntary like the first three? Do we still need to make these sacrifices? You decide.